Loudness is a different animal nowadays with all of the streaming services doing their loudness normalization, which is a good thing. However, it changes what we do in mastering now. Because if everything's coming out at the same volume, whether it was mastered with dynamics or if it was crushed to death and it's physically loud, Spotify, iTunes, radio, I think pretty much all of the streaming services, I know SoundCloud doesn't do it yet, but they have a target loudness. And they're not talking about digital peak zero, they're actually talking about the physical loudness of it. Spotify's target loudness is minus 14 dB now. There's a lot of different metering and ways of doing target loudnesses. I have some different metering setups of my own. Minus 14 is a pretty low level, but it allows you to have good dynamics in the recording. Point being that if you give something to Spotify that was mastered extremely loudly, it's just going to turn it down by 10, 8, 6 dB, whatever it needs to turn it down so that the loudness of it averaged over the entire song. So there's different ways of reading this. So the loudness is averaged over the entire song, and it's just going to raise and lower them so that they all come out the same loudness. So a ballad is going to technically be the same loudness as this heavy metal song that we're working on right now. So anyway, it gives mastering engineers, producers, and artists something to think about. If the main outlet for music now, the main distribution, is going to be streaming services, and they're all going to be playing everything the same volume regardless of whether or not it's physically loud on the master, everybody's stuff is the same volume, so nobody's going to be competing for loudness anymore. It all comes out the same. And if I've crushed the level so that it's physically loud, it's just going to turn it down and it's going to sound wimpy loud. Going to be no punch and no dynamic to it. The hard part and the rub is what day do you say, okay, here's the day that I start doing things at a more reasonable dynamic level, or here's the day where I'm not going to do that. A lot of times it has to do with the artist and the producer. Because of where we're at right now in the transition from physical medias, CDs, etc., into online, we're in this area where nobody knows. Do we do it for CDs and make it loud, which wasn't necessary to begin with, but it became the trend? Or do we do it for streaming services, or do we do multiple masters? Anyway, something to think about. There's all kinds of online information. It's beyond the scope of what we're talking about today. But what level are we going to master this to? Being a metal song, you probably want it to be pretty loud and impactful in that way. They've already done quite a bit of compression, so I can tell just by listening to their mix that they're wanting a thick, kind of classic metal type of song. So I guess what we'll do is kind of master this one, not super duper loud. I'm going to make it sound good. Basically, I just want to make it sound good. But just for the sake of learning, I am going to make a target level on it. As far as loudness levels, I'm going to pull out a meter on the output here that I'm listening to. And we're going to use a loudness of minus 11 LUFS. LUFS is loudness units versus full-scale digital, so LUFS. A target of 11 means that it's going to, my loudness level is going to hover right around minus 11 dB. So we're going to do that for this particular song. I have a hip-hop track that we'll do next, and we'll just make that one loud like I would have, any time before we worried about streaming levels or anything. So with the screenshot of the PC here, you can now see this metering system. And this is a normal peak meter right here on the left-hand side of it. These are my loudness meters, and there's three different ways of reading it. There's momentary loudness, the M level, which is kind of basically how you hear it. As you can see, it's responding a little quicker. Then there's the slow level, which is an average of 10 seconds. It kind of shows you the average of the song. And then there's the integrated level, which takes slow and fast into, or slow and momentary into account. And because I have a target of 11 dB, I can see on the screen this little area here where I'm too low at the moment. I'm And looking at the integrated level here, it tells me that I'm 5 dB below where it needs to be. So we need to make this 5 dB louder.
I'm all in, it's the only way. In too deep, can't turn away. Fight through the struggle, do it on the double. Give up your soul.
So I have analog gain, I have limiters. I'm gonna try to use the limiter as little as possible. Looking at my peak levels, I can bring up another level, about another dB in the analog world without clipping.
Nowhere to live, I'm ready to give it all I got. Still feel burnt out. You're almost there.
Okay, so I'm gonna add one more plugin on here. It's actually another limiter plugin, although I'm really not gonna be doing any limiting with it. The Slate FGX, I'm gonna turn the compressor off and I'm just gonna be using the limiter on it. Get the dither off. It defaults with a number of things I don't want on, so the first thing I'm doing is just going and shutting off a bunch of stuff. Come on. All right, so we've got a limiter here that is more of a clipper, meaning the effect that it has internally is the same as just turning up the gain and clipping it off as if I was going into a converter with it. So it has a definite tone and it gets harsh if you push it too far. What I like about it are the two high and low transient and dynamic perception here. The low and the high transient knobs and the dynamic perception knob kind of work together. I have to make it do a little bit of limiting to make those active, but pretty much when the low end hits, it'll add a bit of a transient to the low end. Not enough to make it sound like it's gonna punch through your speaker or anything, and I don't set them up enough to really call attention to them. What I try to do with this thing if I'm using it is it's kind of an enhancer for me. At the low and the high end, I'll add them just a little bit. They enhance the low and high end. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And that's what I use it for. I don't push the threshold on it. I rarely have it pushed past 1 dB. In this instant, I'm gonna try to do like 0.5 or less than that just to try to get the dynamics out of the low and high end that I like.
What's up, all my people? With me, living in the struggle. Got no money, get no honey. It's what they say, but don't you worry. Working late, got a full plate. Coming home big, can't you relate? It's all this time, wasted time. Can't take it back, you know we're all burnt out. About to black out. Got to break out. Nowhere to live, I'm ready to give it all I got. Still feel burnt out. You're almost out. So never give up and never give in. All this pain you feel within, this is what it takes to win. I'm all in, it's the only way. In too deep, can't turn away. Fight through the struggle, do it on the double. Give up your struggle. All this time, never wasted time. Trust in time, I know we're all burnt. About to black out. Got to break out. Nowhere to live, I'm ready. Still feel burnt out. So never give up and never give up. Don't you burn out. So never give up and never give in. So never give up and never give in.
All right, so listening to this, looking at my target level there, I'm still a little bit low. Although it averages it over the whole song, so I'm really watching this M meter, and we're right on the money where we want it right there. So after it's averaged, quiet sections, loud sections, we should be just right on. One thing that I'm noticing right before I'm saying I'm done with this is that the snare drum is a little buried, and it is a little bit in the mix, so I'm not sure I can bring it out without messing up the guitars and vocal. But I'm gonna see what I can do really quick as far as that's concerned.
What's up, all my people with me, living in the struggle. Get no honey, no honey. It's what they say, but don't you worry. Working late, got a full plate. Coming home big, can't you relate? Was all this time wasting time? Can't take it back, you know we're all burnt out. About to black out, got to break out. Nowhere to live, I'm ready to give it all I got. Still feel burnt out, you're almost out. So never give up and never give in. All this pain you feel within, this is what it takes to win. I'm all in, it's the only way. In too deep, can't turn away. Fight through the struggle, do it on the double. Give up your soul to reach your goal. All this time, never wasting time. Trust in time, I know we're all burnt out.
And I don't think there's anything I can do to really bring that snare out. It's just a little bit too low to make it pop without bringing the vocals with it. It's pretty much panned down the center. Sometimes the snare will be panned off to one side a little more than the other. Very rarely is it hard left or right, but sometimes it'll be panned a little off to one side or the other. And I can use just the side channel to bring the snare out a little without screwing the vocal up. In this particular case, that's not going to work. It's just panned too down the center and it's just a little bit too low over here. Using parallel compression is one thing that would help bring that up, but it screwed up everything else in the song. So unfortunately the parallel compression ain't gonna work in this instance.